Hello? Settle in comfortably, wrap yourself up warmly, and let the gentle whisper of stories carry you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Imagine the year 1944 within the simmering crucible of Kingston, Jamaica. Not the vibrant tourist brochures portray today, but a Kingston grappling with an oppressive colonial legacy, economic disparity, and the burgeoning stirrings of self-determination. Our focus narrows to a specific locale, a place that would become synonymous with both struggle and artistic genesis, Trenchtown. Birthed out of a post-war housing scheme, initially conceived as Trench Pen by the Kingston and St. Andrew Corporation, KSAC, it rapidly transformed. Designed to house returning war veterans and those displaced by rural migration into the capital, Trenchtown was, fundamentally, a government-sponsored slum. The name itself, Trenchtown, derived from a drainage trench that bisected the area, a stark symbol of its utilitarian and often grim reality. Homes, predominantly single-story concrete yards with shared facilities, were structurally basic, yet within these confined spaces, a rich cultural tapestry began to weave itself. Unemployment rates were astronomical, exceeding 25% by the mid-1950s, leading to widespread poverty. This struggle, however, bred resilience. It fostered a unique social dynamic where communal living wasn't just a necessity, but a way of life, cultivating a shared sense of identity and purpose. It was into this environment that Robert Nesta Marley would be introduced. Though born in 9 Mile, St. Anne, it was Trenchtown, specifically 19 Street, that would shape his worldview and infuse his music with the raw authenticity of everyday Jamaican life. This was not merely a backdrop for his formative years. Trenchtown was a co-creator of his artistic voice. Here, among the sounds of street hawkers, the rhythms of quadrille and mento music drifting from radios, and the pervasive scent of struggle and survival, the seeds of a global phenomenon, were being sown. The social and political consciousness that would define Marley's enduring message found its initial potent expression amidst the concrete yards and bustling thoroughfares of this Kingston community, laying the groundwork for a revolution that would echo far beyond Jamaica's shores. From the gritty realism of Trenchtown, a new sound began to emerge, a vibrant confluence of influences that would soon electrify the world. This was the mid-1950s to early 1960s, a period of immense musical fermentation in Jamaica, as American rhythm and blues records, often imported via sailors and bootleg channels, saturated the island's airwaves and sound systems. These R&B tracks, particularly those from New Orleans artists like Fats Domino and Professor Longhair, captivated young Jamaicans. They offered a stark contrast to the traditional mento and calypso, sparking an innovative musical fusion. The evolution was rapid and deliberate. Local musicians, initially mimicking R&B, started injecting their own sensibilities. They emphasized the offbeat, the skank, creating a distinctive rhythm that separated itself from its American progenitor. This was the genesis of ska, a driving, upbeat genre with a walking bass line, a prominent horn section, and a rhythmic emphasis on the second and fourth beats. Pioneering studios like Studio One, founded by Clement Coxone Dodd in 1954, and Treasure Isle, established by Duke Reed, became central hubs for this sonic revolution. These studios weren't just recording spaces. They were cultural incubators where musicians, producers, and arrangers collaboratively shaped this new Jamaican sound. Imagine the bustling atmosphere within Studio One in the early 1960s. Skilled session musicians like the Skatalites laying down seminal tracks, instrumentalists often working for mere shillings, yet crafting a legacy. It was within this vibrant, competitive landscape that Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailer, then known as the Teenagers, later as the Wailing Wailers, honed their craft. Signed to Studio One in 1964, they absorbed the techniques, absorbed the rhythm, and began to infuse their own lyrical narratives into the pulsating ska framework. Their early recordings, such as Simmer Down, released in December 1963, resonated deeply with the youth of Trenchtown, articulating their frustrations and aspirations. This marked not just the birth of a band, but the early rhythmic pulse of a movement, connecting the raw realities of the ghetto to an evolving musical idiom that would soon transform into something even more profound and globally impactful. Ska was the vital first step, a foundational rhythm upon which reggae and Marley's legend would ultimately be built. As the rhythmic pulse of ska evolved, so too did the spiritual consciousness informing the music of Bob Marley and his bandmates. This transformation was inextricably linked to the growing influence of Rastafari, a spiritual movement that emerged in Jamaica in the 1930s. Rastafari, rooted in Abrahamic traditions and Pan-Africanism, reveres Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia as the returned Messiah and God incarnate, known as Jah. Central to its tenets is the belief that Ethiopia represents the Promised Land and that repatriation from the perceived oppression of Babylon, the Western world, is paramount. Within Rastafarian cosmology, the plant cannabis sativa, or Ganja, as it is known in Jamaica, holds profound significance. It is not merely a recreational drug, but a sacrament, a holy herb referred to in the Bible as the tree of life, Revelation 22:2, and the herb of renown, Ezekiel 34:29. This interpretation, while a matter of faith, underpins its ceremonial use. Rastafarians utilize Ganja in their spiritual meditations, known as reasonings, believing it to aid in understanding the self, the universe, and their connection to Jah. The intention is spiritual enlightenment, not physical intoxication. Ganja is thought to bring one closer to wisdom, clarity, and to facilitate deeper contemplation, opening the mind to more profound truths. Consider a typical reasoning in the late 1960s. Trenchtown, Rastafarians, including Marley, Tosh, and Wailer, would gather often under the moonlight to discuss biblical passages, current events, and the plight of their people. During these gatherings, Ganja would be passed and consumed, the smoke acting as a catalyst for introspection and communal spiritual reflection. This was a direct defiance of colonial laws, which had outlawed cannabis in Jamaica as early as 1913, echoing similar prohibitions worldwide. Its use became an act of spiritual freedom and cultural resistance against an oppressive system. For Bob Marley, the adoption of Rastafarianism in the mid-1960s was a revelation. It provided a coherent ideology that articulated the injustices he witnessed in Trenchtown and throughout post-colonial Jamaica. Ganja, as a sacrament, became intertwined with his artistic and spiritual expression. It sharpened his lyrical focus, deepened his messages, and connected him more profoundly to the roots of his identity and his call for universal justice and liberation. The sacred smoke fueled not just personal insight, but provided a powerful conduit through which his music would transmit the Rastafarian message of peace, resistance, and unity to a global audience, transforming cannabis from a forbidden substance into a symbol of conscious rebellion. Kingston, Jamaica, in the late 1960s and early 1970s, was a city of stark contradictions, a concrete jungle where poverty and political strife simmered, yet simultaneously a vibrant crucible of unparalleled creativity. This era witnessed not only the maturation of ska into rocksteady and then reggae, but also the flourishing of a unique artistic ecosystem that propelled these sounds globally. The city's dynamic environment, marked by both hardship and ingenious resourcefulness, proved fertile ground for musical innovation. The sound system culture, first emerging in the 1950s, solidified its role as a fundamental driver of musical evolution. Operators like King Tubby and Prince Buster were not just DJs, they were pioneers, their colossal hand-built speaker stacks transforming open spaces into electrifying dance halls. It was in these competitive arenas that new tracks were first tested, often pressed as dub plates, single, acetate records, before wider release. The crowd's reactions dictated a track's fate, fostering a direct feedback loop between artists and audience. This immediate response mechanism accelerated the pace of musical change, pushing producers and musicians to constantly innovate. The shift from the frantic pace of ska to the more laid-back, often melancholic rhythms of rocksteady in the mid-1960s was a critical transition. This slower tempo brought the bass and drums to the forefront, creating space for more intricate vocal harmonies and poignant lyrical themes, many reflecting the social realities of Kingston. Then, by the late 1960s, rocksteady transmuted into reggae. Reggae distinguished itself with an even more prominent bass line, often played in a repetitive, hypnotic pattern, and a distinctive one-drop drumming style that emphasized the third beat of the measure. This slower, heavier rhythm provided a perfect canvas for the growing spiritual and political messages of Rastafarianism. Bob Marley and the Wailers were central to this transformation. Their move from Studio One to working with different producers, notably Lee Scratch Perry at his Black Ark studio, allowed them to experiment freely. Perry's innovative production techniques, incorporating echo, reverb, and delays, were groundbreaking, contributing to reggae's distinctive sonic texture. Tracks like Duppy Conqueror and Small Axe showcased their increasingly Rasta-inspired lyrics and sophisticated musical arrangements. Kingston was not just the birthplace of this music. It was the active, living laboratory, a concrete jungle whose energy, struggles, and spiritual awakenings were distilled into a sound that would soon resonate far beyond its sun-drenched, dust-choked streets, becoming a voice for the oppressed globally. By the early 1970s, the raw energy emanating from Kingston began to transcend Jamaica's borders, propelled largely by the rising star of Bob Marley and the Wailers. Their pivotal 1972 signing with Chris Blackwell's Island Records marked a turning point, not just for the band, but for reggae music's global trajectory. Blackwell, an Englishman raised in Jamaica, recognized the profound potential of the Wailers' sound and vision. Unlike previous international releases of Jamaican music, which often received minimal promotion or were marketed solely to niche audiences, Blackwell invested heavily, treating Bob Marley as a rock star. The albums Catch a Fire, 1973, and Burnin', 1973, were meticulously produced, moving away from the raw sound system aesthetic towards a more accessible, rock-infused presentation. This strategic production choice, combined with extensive international touring, opened the floodgates. Tracks like Get Up, Stand Up, and I Shot the Sheriff, famously covered by Eric Clapton in 1974, resonated widely, introducing millions to reggae's infectious rhythms and conscious lyrics. Marley wasn't just performing, he was delivering a message, frequently incorporating Rastafarian symbolism and advocating for social justice, anti-colonialism, and African unity. The album Exodus, released in 1977, became particularly iconic, cementing Marley's status as a global prophet of resistance. Recorded after an assassination attempt on Marley in Jamaica, the album's themes of movement, spiritual awakening, and liberation spoke to a universal yearning for freedom. Its reggae, rock, and blues fusion, coupled with powerful lyrical content, garnered unprecedented international acclaim. Exodus spent 56 consecutive weeks on the UK Albums Chart, a testament to its widespread appeal and transformative impact. During this period, Marley's public embrace of Rastafarianism, including his dreadlocks and his open sacramental use of Ganja, became inextricable from his persona. Ganja, previously a stigmatized, illegal substance, was now visibly associated with a charismatic, internationally adored figure advocating peace and rebellion against oppression. Marley's concerts became spiritual gatherings where the faint, sweet scent of ganja mingled with the music, linking it directly to the message of freedom and spiritual insight. This direct, uncompromising presentation, amplified by his global platform, began to shift perceptions, turning the sacred smoke into a ubiquitous symbol of a countercultural movement, resistance, and a quest for liberation that transcended race and geography. Marley's exodus was not just a journey of a musician, it was the migration of a culture and its symbols into the global consciousness. As Bob Marley's fame ascended globally, so too did the scrutiny and controversy surrounding his open embrace of cannabis. For Marley and the Rastafari movement, Babylon System was more than just a song title. It represented the oppressive, corrupt, and materially driven structures of the Western world that actively sought to suppress their spiritual and cultural practices, including the sacramental use of ganja. The legal prohibition of cannabis in Jamaica, first enacted in 1913 and reinforced over decades, meant that Rastafarians faced constant harassment, arrests, and social marginalization for practicing their faith. The fight for freedom and herb became a central tenet of Marley's message, inextricably linked to the broader struggle against injustice and economic exploitation. His lyrics, laden with Rastafarian imagery and socio-political commentary, frequently challenged the criminalization of ganja. Songs like Ganja Gun by Peter Tosh, Marley's bandmate, directly confronted police brutality and the hypocrisies of drug laws. Marley himself wasn't just singing about it. During his global tours, he consistently consumed ganja publicly, sometimes even passing a spliff to the audience from the stage. This audacious act, particularly in countries with stringent anti-drug laws, served as a defiant declaration of his beliefs and a direct challenge to what he perceived as unjust Babylon laws. This public stance was not without consequence. While it solidified his authenticity for fans, it also drew the attention of authorities. Reports suggest constant surveillance by intelligence agencies in various countries, and he faced numerous minor arrests for cannabis possession, which he often viewed as acts of persecution rather than legitimate legal infractions. For Marley, the fight for the herb was fundamentally a fight for religious freedom and cultural rights. He argued that ganja was a divine plant, a gift from Yah, and that its prohibition constituted a sacrilege and an infringement on fundamental human rights. Marley's international platform transformed the conversation around cannabis. What had long been considered solely an illegal drug associated with deviance now, through his music and persona, gained an association with spiritual seeking, cultural identity, and a potent symbol of resistance against systemic oppression. His unapologetic and visible consumption normalized it for millions, particularly young people drawn to his message of rebellion and liberation. The Babylon system was fighting to maintain control, but Marley's sacred smoke was already becoming a beacon for a counterculture, challenging established norms and pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable, sparking a demand for reevaluation of cannabis laws globally. Despite the legal battles and societal stigmas, Bob Marley consistently leveraged his global platform to promote a message of one love, one heart, transcending political divides and racial barriers. Central to this unifying message was his philosophy surrounding cannabis. Far from being a divisive element, Marley viewed and presented ganja as a tool for spiritual communion and collective understanding, a bridge rather than a barrier between people. This perspective profoundly influenced the global perception of the plant. Marley's performances were not merely concerts. They were often seen as spiritual gatherings, marked by a pervasive atmosphere of unity and shared spiritual elevation. The visual of Marley, dreadlocked and often with a spliff in hand, became iconic. This imagery, combined with his lyrics advocating for peace, love, and unity, embedded cannabis within a positive, communal context for millions worldwide. For many, his music and persona offered an alternative narrative to the mainstream demonization of the plant, suggesting it could facilitate introspective thought and collective empathy, rather than simply being a gateway to delinquency. A powerful example of this unifying role occurred at the One Love Peace concert in Kingston, Jamaica, in April 1978. Against a backdrop of violent political rivalry between Jamaica's two main parties, the People's National Party, PNP, and the Jamaican Labour Party, JLP, Marley courageously brought the two opposing political leaders, Michael Manley and Edward Seaga, onto the stage. In a historically significant moment, he joined their hands above his head, chanting, "One Love." While not explicitly involving cannabis, this act of audacious peacemaking was deeply rooted in the Rastafarian principles of unity and spiritual reconciliation. Principles which Marley often articulated were enhanced through sacramental herb use. The concert itself, a massive public gathering infused with reggae's spiritual energy, was a testament to the power of shared experience and musical transcendence. Through Marley's global outreach, cannabis shed some of its illicit aura, particularly within subcultures seeking alternative expressions and spiritual pathways. It became associated with a laid-back yet deeply conscious lifestyle that championed social justice, environmentalism, and human solidarity. Marley essentially rebranded cannabis for a generation, transforming it from a symbol of societal deviance into an emblem of cultural resistance, spiritual connection, and universal love. It facilitated conversations, broke down preconceived notions, and helped nurture a sense of global community that continues to resonate today, affirming cannabis's role as a symbol for unity and a rejection of oppressive systems. Bob Marley's music transcended mere entertainment. It became the undisputed rebel music, an anthemic soundtrack for global movements seeking liberation, justice, and self-determination. His lyrics, infused with Rastafarian philosophy, Pan-Africanism, and a clear anti-colonial stance, offered solace and inspiration to oppressed communities worldwide, particularly in Africa and among diasporic communities. The profound impact of his music lay in its ability to articulate universal struggles against systemic injustice, while simultaneously offering a positive, spiritual pathway forward. Marley's influence was particularly potent in Africa. In 1980, he was invited to perform at Zimbabwe's independence celebrations, a watershed moment. As the Union Jack was lowered and the new Zimbabwean flag raised, Marley's performance of Zimbabwe provided an electrifying soundtrack to the birth of a nation recently freed from oppressive white minority rule. This concert was not just a performance. It was a powerful symbol of solidarity, validating the struggles of liberation movements across the continent. His music gave voice to the aspirations of millions, articulating their pain, resilience, and hope for a brighter future. The themes embedded in his music, resistance, unity, self-emancipation, and spiritual freedom, resonated deeply across diverse cultural and political landscapes. From the townships of South Africa, where his songs became anthems during the apartheid struggle, to the indigenous rights movements in the Americas, Marley's message found eager listeners. The song Redemption Song, released shortly before his death, exemplifies this enduring legacy, a stark acoustic call to emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. This spiritual call to arms, intertwined with his public persona and ritualistic use of cannabis, cemented the plant's association with defiance against oppressive systems and a deeper consciousness. Expert analysis often points to Marley's unique ability to bridge the sacred and the secular, the spiritual and the political. He presented Rastafari, with its emphasis on cannabis as a sacrament, not as an exclusive dogma, but as an inclusive philosophy, advocating freedom and unity for all. This universality made his rebel music a powerful force, turning cannabis, through its intrinsic link to his message, into a potent symbol of defiance, introspection, and the ongoing global struggle for human rights and liberation from all forms of oppression. While Bob Marley's public persona often highlighted cannabis's spiritual and resistant qualities, a less overtly celebrated, yet equally significant, aspect of its use within Rastafari and broader Jamaican culture was its perceived medicinal value. Long before the modern medical cannabis movement gained traction in the West, Ganja was deeply embedded in traditional Caribbean folk medicine, often passed down through generations. This historical context informed the Rastafarian view of the plant not just as a sacrament, but as a holistic healer for both body and mind. Historically, in Jamaica and other Caribbean islands, cannabis was a common remedy for a variety of ailments. Research by anthropologists and ethnomedical scholars indicates its use as an analgesic for pain, an anti-inflammatory, and a treatment for digestive issues, asthma, and glaucoma. Preparations included Ganja tea for colds and fever, poultices for external wounds, and even inhaled smoke for respiratory complaints. This traditional knowledge often existed in direct opposition to colonial laws that demonized the plant, forcing its continued use underground. For Rastafarians, the belief in Ganja's healing properties was integral to their adherence to a natural, vital lifestyle, emphasizing organic, unprocessed foods and plant-based remedies. They believed that Rastafari is a natural healing force, and Ganja was considered one of nature's purest gifts, intended for the well-being of humanity. This perspective aligned with their rejection of Babylon pharmaceuticals, often seen as artificial and harmful. Marley himself, throughout his life, was known to consume ganja not only for spiritual insight, but also as part of his holistic health regimen. While his untimely death from cancer in 1981 tragically cut short his life, it inadvertently sparked further conversations about cannabis and health, particularly concerning the palliative and therapeutic qualities that are now widely researched and accepted in many parts of the world. Though he never explicitly articulated the plant's entire medicinal pharmacopoeia to the masses, his consistent use and the Rastafarian context implicitly contributed to a growing global consciousness about cannabis's potential beyond recreation. From the ghettos of Kingston, where it was a traditional remedy, Bob Marley's global platform indirectly helped elevate cannabis from a stigmatized drug to a plant increasingly recognized for its multifaceted healing touch, bridging traditional knowledge systems with burgeoning scientific inquiry. Bob Marley's physical presence may have departed in 1981, but his immense legacy in the air, both cultural and literal, continues to burn brightly, shaping perceptions of cannabis and resistance across the globe. His indelible image, intrinsically linked with the holy herb, cemented cannabis as a universal symbol of spiritual and political defiance, a countercultural icon, and a deeply personal sacrament for millions. This legacy is not merely nostalgic. It is a driving force behind contemporary discussions on cannabis legalization, cultural identity, and social justice. Marley's impact is quantifiable. His albums continue to sell millions, with Legend remaining one of the best-selling reggae albums of all time. Beyond sales, Marley's global influence is evidenced by the pervasive sight of his likeness, often featuring him with a spliff worn on clothing, adorned in college dorms, and emblazoned across merchandise worldwide. This ubiquitous imagery has permeated mainstream culture, constantly reminding new generations of his connection to cannabis and its intertwined meaning of freedom and rebellion. More profoundly, Marley's persistent advocacy for the herb, rooted in Rastafarianism, laid critical groundwork for the global cannabis reform movement. He provided a spiritual and cultural defense for its use that extended beyond hedonism, highlighting its role in meditation, community, and resistance against unjust laws. This perspective has been pivotal in informing arguments for religious freedom exemptions in cannabis legislation and challenging the historical demonization of the plant. Activists and proponents for legalization frequently invoke Marley's name, implicitly or explicitly, acknowledging his role in destigmatizing cannabis and elevating it to a symbol of consciousness and cultural heritage. Today, as nations and regions reconsider their cannabis policies, from medicinal access in Thailand to recreational legalization in Canada and parts of the United States, Marley's enduring flame flickers within these debates. His vision of one love and his challenge to the Babylon system continue to inspire. A world where harmony triumphs over division and freedom from arbitrary oppression includes the right to cultivate and consume a plant deemed sacred. The eternal blaze of Marley's legacy ensures that cannabis remains not just an herb, but a potent, globally recognized symbol of culture, resistance, and the ongoing human quest for liberation.